Okay, brilliant. Okay, hello everyone. Hope you're all doing well today. Now, we are doing something a little bit different today. You might notice we're not on Zoom and we are trying StreamYard. So, can you all introduce yourself in the chat? Who are you? Where are you coming from? Why are you interested in attending today? And this will just give us a little bit of context. We have something really exciting for you today, an amazing guest. And just so you know, what we've been doing for the last few years is every week, essentially, you've been listening to me chat for an hour, and that's fun. I love it. But I thought maybe you might be getting a little bit bored with my voice, at least all the time. So now we're going to do every fortnight. We're going to bring an amazing guest in. And for the first time, we are currently streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and all of that good stuff. What can possibly go wrong? No, I'm sure it's going to be great. So I'm just going to see. We've got Jess, we got Anna, Angela, Rod, Danny. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just chatting to our guest, who I will introduce about my pronunciations, but I'll do my best. Oh, Anne Marie, good to see you again. Beth King, what a solid name. Tom, Sen, Nis, Danny RCO's here. Usama, brilliant. 33 from Leeds, late diagnosis, ADHD, autism, and hypermobility. Well, today is going to be very relevant for yourself. We have Zach, UK, ADHD in Black. Good to have you, Zach. We've got April, our content creator. Brilliant. Okay, nice stuff. Oh, Matt from Switzerland. Brilliant. Nicole. Oh, Montreal. Brilliant. Matt, level 2 ASD. I'm clearly guessing, again, that is quite an American way, or at least a DSM way of talking about autism, where in the UK, we typically don't talk about it in terms of levels. So that's an easy way of knowing where someone's coming from. Anna Marie from Catford. Nice. I used to live very near Catford. I like the big cat that's kind of like hanging over. All right, cool. Well, I think we are good to go. Now, just a little bit of introduction for those of you who are not aware. My name's Nat. I have dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, OCD, and a whole other heap of stuff. And that always sounds like a lot of things. Like, Nat, what are you, collecting Pokemon, trying to collect them all? No, it's called intersectionality or comorbidity or co-occurrence. Basically, if you have one thing, you have another thing, you have another. It all kind of goes together. And that is exactly what we're talking about today with our guest. So to introduce, we have Elizabeth Takyi today. I just spoke about names. I'll let them introduce themselves properly. But they are an absolute juggernaut of the dyslexia world. They founded an organization called Aspire to Inspire Dyslexia, which supported people across Wandsworth and beyond. They have lived experience of dyslexia, ADHD, Ireland syndrome, also known as visual stress, as well as mobility and dyscalculia and other things as well. They've got awards coming out of the woodworks. I can only mention a few of them here, but we've been in Forbes, Genius Within Awards. We've got Most Inspirational Woman, British Dyslexia Association, Smart Award, just to name a few. Also, they take part in the all-party parliamentary group around dyslexia. And honestly, that's just like the tip of the iceberg. Oh, and they are an ambassador for Neurobox, one of our great partners. So without further delay, let's bring you in, Elizabeth. Okay. Oh, make sure I want to do the right button. Oh, here we are. Yay, Elizabeth. Great to have you.
Hi, Matt. Good afternoon. Hello. Lovely. Thank you so much for this.
Honestly, this is our very first one that we're doing with our guests, so it's so good to have you. And I was a guest on your podcast a few years back, so it feels like a nice full circle.
Absolutely. It's amazing. It's why I love working in this space, that we all kind of work together, collaborate in some way, because it's all for one common goal, isn't it? To support people with neurodiversity and disability across the board. Yeah.
Nice. And I know also you have a really interesting story about how you got to understand your neurodivergence and how it kind of interplays with your identity, and when you were diagnosed. I was wondering if you could just spend a couple minutes talking about your story, if you're happy to do so.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good day, wherever you are that you've joined us today. My name's Elizabeth Takyi, and I just wanted to first of all say that my pronouns is she, because I think when Matt was introducing me, I think he was using they a lot. But my pronouns is she, her, or is it her, she, whichever way around that people write it on the LinkedIn page and email signature. So yeah, she is my pronouns. In fact, I should have put that there, but never mind. So my name's Elizabeth Takyi, and how do I begin to introduce myself? I'm Neurobox ambassador and a speaker, and I've been working at Neurobox for almost a year and 6 months. Absolutely love the job I do there. As much as it says ambassador speaker, I do a lot more within that role. Prior to joining Neurobox, my job that I did, I was a founder and a CEO of a very amazing, if I can say that, charitable organization, which a CIC. We're based in Wandsworth. We started with like one person as a support group, and we grew to such a big impact on the community that we were serving. Although we started in Wandsworth, we didn't stay in Wandsworth. We ended up everywhere in London and outside, as outskirts. And during pandemic, of course, we're global. So that was really amazing. But I'm just going to go back a little bit just to, talk a little bit about my role in Neurobox. As an ambassador speaker, I attend events and I attend conferences, and I speak for the brand of Neurobox and promote the amazing work they do. And some of the work they do is supporting neurodivergent people in the workplace, supporting HR managers for making sure that they're supporting their team. And also we deal with access to work support, line manager training, and the list is on and on and on. So I think when I finish talking, Matt may want to add a link to some of the things that he might share on social media. So that's a little bit about Neurobox. Now let's come to the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. So I got diagnosed with dyslexia in 2002. Prior to having the diagnosis, I wasn't aware or didn't have a clue that I had any lived experience of neurodiversity. So when I got diagnosed, it was a bit of a shock for me, and I was totally in denial to accept that I was living with the condition dyslexia. But I always knew something wasn't right with me because I'm a big time failure in education, big time failure in the workplace, and everything that happened prior to having the diagnosis. When the diagnosis was picked up at university, I denied it, didn't want nothing to do with it, didn't want the label, just thought, actually, there's nothing wrong with me, but there's something wrong with the person who's actually assessing me. That's what I used to say to myself. So even though I got the diagnosis, I actually kind of locked it in a cupboard and didn't want nothing to do with it. And the reason why I did that is because I didn't want to be different, in vertical commas. I just wanted to be accepted, didn't want the label or none of that. Well, one thing I can say, to cut a very long story short, I failed my university first year drastically because I didn't really accept the help that I needed. But I've always kind of been somebody who starts something and not finish, start and stop, start and stop. So I was very determined this time round to finish my degree. And I did that with, honestly, stress, pure stress at the time. What was wonderful was once I got the diagnosis, I got support at university from the study skills team. And that's what helped me to graduate. And that's what helped me as a result. I'm sitting here today as a result of my university diagnosis. So I'm going to leave it there and then get Matt to kind of ask me the next question, because I would dive into the importance of why the label dyslexia as a Black woman with disability, why it was very important for me to have that. Because there are some cases where people say, actually, sorry, excuse me, people will actually say, well, they self-diagnose and that's fine. But as a woman of color and having a disability, sometimes I wasn't believed if I said I had dyslexia and other neurodiversity conditions. So once I had the assessment for the dyslexia, what's to follow was dyspraxia assessment. So the dyspraxia and dyslexia was done together at uni. Then I find out that I've got dyscalculia in 2023. I can't remember the dates because I'm very bad with maths and numbers. Then ADHD followed about 2 years ago. And I'm now waiting for my autism assessment. So all these different diagnoses were done at different times. So like Matt said earlier, so many different labels. But I can honestly sit here and say to you, as much as I was in denial at the time, I celebrate all these labels because it's made me who I am today. And I can sit here today and share my story with many.
Thanks so much for that, Elizabeth. That's really, thank you. That's really interesting. I would definitely be interested in a moment to understand, is there like a benefit to receiving the multiple diagnosis, or is it kind of like a diminishing returns? Because I often find, in my experience at least, is that once you have one diagnosis, the support you get, particularly in education, is kind of the same. So for example, for me, in university, dyslexia affected me a lot, but unfortunately my diagnosis wasn't really accepted, but my autism diagnosis was accepted. But yet my autism didn't really affect me in my education, from my view. However, I had to kind of like mix and match in order to get the support. So I'd be curious to just take your quick words on that before I dive into the next question.
Okay, I just wanted to also make it very clear that everything I share here is my personal journey. It's never generic, because the way dyslexia affects me will affect Matt in a different way. So just to say that individual people's condition affect them in different ways, and they have different challenges. Some are quite similar, but in most cases you might find that some people are dyslexic, but they're very brilliant readers. I'm dyslexic. I'm terrible at all of it. Read, write, spell, all of it, to be honest with you, and memory and retention and things like that. So going back to your question, Matt, which I forgot, you might have to repeat again because I completely forgotten it now.
It was like you were telling how you've been and are getting diagnosed for multiple things. Do you find the same benefit in getting diagnosis for each of your kind of key characteristics, or is one enough?
No, for me, it was very important. I didn't know all the different labels until they kind of exhibit their self. And it was like, God, why am I struggling in this area? Then I thought, well, maybe let me go and find out why. And as I went to find out why, the result would come back as, yes, you have dyslexia and dyspraxia. I thought, okay, I can deal with that. Now I've got this. Can I please get the help I need? Because prior to that, when I was working for a certain large organization, I wasn't believed that I've got dyslexia. It was more like, oh, is she being lazy? She's not trying hard enough. Is it just an excuse not to do it? That label, that report was very important for me to have. So yes, it's important for me personally. And having the dyslexia and dyspraxia diagnosis made me, it was a lot more, people accepted me a lot more than if I didn't. Because there was a lot of challenges. Like I wasn't believed at times. It was like, even at one point, somebody said to me, oh, do Black people have dyslexia? Yes, we do. At one point, it was like that. And this is some time ago. And even now, there may be that perception that, actually, I'm not too sure. Maybe we need to go get an assessment done. So those two conditions, yes. The dyscalculia, yes. The ADHD, yes. All those labels were very important for me, as well as having the diagnosis. Although most people say they don't need it, which is fine. But for me, it was a must.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And I think you cannot accept your identity apart, because for instance, being a white male, people were very, I didn't need the diagnosis to get help necessary, but there is like an element of credibility around it. So anyway, I've already got distracted. My first actual question is, how did your diagnosis impact your self-perception, identity in daily life?
Right. Okay. I'm going to have to chop all these questions up. So I'm going to read a little bit, answer, and then move on. Yeah. And I just wanted to go back to say, Matt, because my dyslexia is really, for me, it's very severe, even though it doesn't present itself in that way. A lot of people say, but you're very articulate, and you speak very well, and you're a speaker, and you do all these things. But how I speak and how I come across doesn't really reflect on paper the same way. So in the workplace, it was a bit like, well, we don't really know what's wrong with Elizabeth. And by having those reports that I had, it on the back of the recommendation, it was like, well, what help can we give her? How can we support her with the right tools in the workplace? And that's why the first question you asked me was very important, that I had the report and then got the support that I needed workplace and in education. So to this question now, how did your diagnosis impact your self-perception, identity in daily life? It's liberating for me. For me, it was like, okay, so this is me. I have dyslexia. This is who I am. And I can actually say to wherever I go, it could be signing an insurance form. It could be a mortgage application. It can be anything that's written that I have to understand. If I say to somebody, well, actually, I've got dyslexia and I really struggle with this, then it's like, oh, okay, how best can we support you? So having the label and having the identity in my daily life, it's just been liberating for me. You know, I know that in certain communities, there's still stigma attached to this, but I wear the label with pride and I walk with my head high. Yeah.
Have you found similar people with similar backgrounds to yourself have a similar approach, or is this quite unique to yourself?
I think most people, I can't speak for everybody, but I know people from ethnic minority background and some of the different communities would probably say that, especially people with foreign language. I forgot the name, what the word they use. English as a second language. Yes, sometimes people are not the kind of people I've supported in the past have said to me, you know what, Liz, I've been told that I don't have dyslexia, but it's a language barrier and that I can't speak English properly or write English properly. And I think my point I'm making is it doesn't matter where you're from or what your background is or what language you speak. Dyslexia is dyslexia. So when I was running A2I dyslexia and I met so many people with English as a second language who maybe in education, they've been told that, well, actually, I think because you don't speak English very well, that's why you're struggling. But that's not the case. Dyslexia is dyslexia. So going back to the question you asked me, some people from those communities would say, well, actually, once they got the label, it was easier for them to navigate in the education system and in the workplace. And once they got their diagnosis, as in the paper they were holding on to, the help had to be given to them. And it wasn't so much that they were speaking different language and that's why they were struggling. Yeah.
The language subject is really interesting because I've read reports where people have said that in one language, dyslexia affects them a great deal, but in their other language, barely at all. And I was wondering if you have any take on how do you know when something is due to your language abilities and when something is due to dyslexia?
Well, to be honest, I'm not a dyslexia assessor and I'm not a dyslexia specialist in terms of cognitively. However, what I do know is that I speak 4 different languages.
Wow.
I don't write 4 different languages. Yeah, I speak 3 different languages in African language and also English. But I know that across the board, when I'm saying a certain word in my language, I still struggle and stumble. So dyslexia represents itself no matter what language I'm speaking.
Oh, in all of them?
In all of them. The pronunciation, in how I'm saying something, in how I'm articulating myself. As a result, I speak with a lot of hand gestures because sometimes I really struggle to get my point across. So I have to kind of speak with my hand gesture and trying to kind of affirm what I'm trying to say. So for me, with somebody with the multiple layers of dyslexia, of neurodiversity conditions, it represents itself in all shape or form. It doesn't change because I'm speaking a Ghanaian language or if I have to write something. Someone else might have a different approach to that, but that's, for me personally, that's how it is. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I've read reports in the past where people said in countries that use a different type of alphabet, for instance, in China, there is lower levels of dyslexia because of the way that the writing is more kind of image-based. That being said, it could also be that there's less awareness there, so less diagnosis. So I think the jury is still out, but it is interesting that how our language was created does play a big impact to not whether or not you have dyslexia or not, but how dyslexia impacts you. you and affects you on day to day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for example, if I have to speak in my own native language, my parents are from Ghana, West Africa originally. So if I have to say something, I still struggle I can't find the word, or I'm still struggling to process what someone has said to me, and that's because dyslexia is pulling me back and I can't really say those words. So whether it's English or whether it's where I'm from, it's exactly the same for me personally. But I think the point I was trying to make with the English as a foreign language, when I was running my organization and people came for help, they were like, well, Liz, actually, I've been told that I can't get this assessment I need because I'm speaking, I don't know, Spanish or French or whatever it might be. So I would normally say, if you can afford the assessment, go and get that assessment for yourself, if you can afford it. If not, then perhaps in a workplace, I know it's all different now. If you're happy to self-diagnose, then great. And if you've got a great line manager who understands, then absolutely wonderful. But it's never been plain sailing like that for me in the past. No.
I think that kind of brings us quite nicely onto our next question, which is, did you face additional barriers to diagnosis as a Black woman navigating healthcare and education systems? Because you mentioned that if you can get one, you should get one. But is it the same process, or do you think there's additional challenges due to your background?
Well, first of all, it's the cost, isn't it? It's the cost involved. So, I mean, I'm not the richest of the richest person, but if you've got to do all these different diagnoses, cost a lot of money. So if you haven't got the funds to be able to do that, then that's a challenge in itself. That's a barrier in the first place. I've been quite fortunate that my diagnosis for dyslexia and dyspraxia was done at university. So it was done through the student support services. I didn't have to pay for that. The dyscalculia, I had to pay for that. And I felt that because it's quite expensive. And most of the other ones I had to pay for. But that is the barrier in itself in terms of the cost. And then, of course, sometimes when I've gone somewhere and I've actually said, look, I've got dyslexia, people look at me as if I'm an alien. And it's like, oh, really? Okay, so how best can we help you? Oh, I'm not even believed because I've said, because I articulate really well. One of my strongest skills that I have is public speaking, and I can do that with speak in front of millions of people. But can I write in front of millions of people? No. So there's been a bit of a problem or challenge in that area. And then if it's in a workplace, I would then say, well, actually, maybe I need workplace needs assessment, and here's my report. And then everything will kind of be okay in that sense. So navigating the healthcare, for example, I've recently had a hip operation, so I have to go in and out of hospital for regular checkups. And I think the consultant who's seeing to me, I said, I've got dyslexia, so please go easy for me, because I'm not going to understand everything you're saying to me. In terms of medication I have to take, everything has to be slowly explained to me, because otherwise I'll walk out of there not understanding what I need to do. But have I experienced challenges? Yes, because when I've actually said to a nurse or a doctor, I've got dyslexia, and they're like, okay, and they're still carrying on what they're doing. Nothing's changed, even though I've mentioned this. So then sometimes it comes across like as if, I don't think the word aggressive is the right word, but because I'm really trying to assert myself and I can't, it's like I think they get frustrated, and sometimes I get frustrated as well. So yes, I have had challenges navigating the healthcare system. Education system, to be honest, I have to give it a plus. Education for me really worked in terms of my university assessment, which has helped me to be where I am today. It's not the same story for everybody else, but for me, it's worked in my favor. And I'm grateful for that I had that opportunity to be able to get assessed and explore different things that I wanted to do on my career path. Yeah.
It has been said, though, with the diagnostic system that it is very biased and tailored towards essentially people from Western countries, white males. Did you find that, was it adapted towards your gender and background, or was it like the generic assessments? And does it need to be tailored, do you think?
To be honest with you, when I had my assessment, I was really fortunate. It was one of my lecturers that said, look, if you don't go for help with the way you're writing your essays, remember in 2002, we didn't have AI and you know, all these chat GTP and all these things that people are using now. So I had to handwrite my essay. It was through the handwritten essays that I used to do at university that one of my lecturers picked up on the dyslexia. So she's the one that referred me. So it was kind of a smooth transition for me. It wasn't where I'm fighting for my rights and saying, look, I've got dyslexia and I need help. So it was really a smooth transition for me. In fact, she was pleading with me to go, because she said, look, if you really want a degree, then I would recommend you go and get this assessment done. So it's been a positive outcome in terms of how I've come to know that I've got neurodiverse condition and what started it off to where I am now. So that's been a huge plus for me. And that's why I was very keen to start the company I did, because I knew that I can help other people to reach their full potential by going for help in that way. And I think I also wanted to say that, you know, in the workplace, access to work has been so great in how I've had support in the workplace to be able to excel for the work that I do in both A2I and also at Neurobox. It's just been absolutely amazing with the access to work support that I've had. And if you've got a great line manager as well who understands, then of course they're going to support you on your journey with your neurodiversity conditions. And just wanted to add also that I also have a physical disability, which is osteoarthritis. So currently I'm working with walking aids. So again, that is another area that's been another barrier added on to the different conditions that I have. But it's been really great that I've had the support that I need at work. Yeah. Okay. I think, Matt, we might have had a little bit of a technical problem, but I can continue speaking if that's okay. So there's been a lot of positive from the different diagnoses I've had. And I wanted to also say that anybody who's joined this call, if you feel like you might have any hidden disability, i.e. dyslexia or dyscalculia or ADHD or any of those things that we've spoken about, if you're in a workplace, you can reach out to your line manager or to HR and speak about the help and support that there is available. I mean, currently in the workplace, there is a lot of support available if you ask for it. There's a lot of organizations who are doing a lot of work around neurodiversity and disability and all the other things like LGBTQ and all the support that people need in a workplace to thrive. So I would encourage anybody who's on this call and may think, oh, I might have a neurodiverse condition, but I'm not too sure how to go about that, can definitely speak to their HR department or their line manager for further support. Yeah, I think I'm here trying to get Matt back, and hopefully he'll come back. I know when we're doing all these a lot of these live events, there can be hiccups along the way. So hopefully Matt will join us. Nat will join us in a minute. Yeah. Okay. I'm still here. I wish people could have asked questions and I could have answered it, but I'm still gonna remain here until Nat joins. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if they don't, I mean, I'm sure they're working in the background to make this work, but I can continue, with my journey with all the different diagnoses that I had. So when I was diagnosed with dyslexia and got all the help I needed and support, I actually decided that I'm going to help other people. I'm not just going to sit on this amazing help and support that I've been given. So my charitable organization started, and we started with just one person who was coming to support group. And within 6 years that we run, we serve over 13,500 people, including events and podcasts and live shows that we used to have. Now, what I normally say is, if dyslexia affects 1 in 10 people, and we serve so many, you can imagine how many more people that are struggling with this hidden neurodiversity condition and possibly not spoke about. But one thing I did also realize that a lot of people from ethnic minority background, whether they were from Black community, Asian community, or any other community, were more happy to come forward and speak about their neurodiverse condition, because sometimes that stigma can hold one back. Because if you actually say to somebody that I've got all the different diagnoses, the perception can be different, and sometimes you're treated differently. So it's really, so when we set up HY Dyslexia, we got people coming to us and being open and talking about all the different experiences they've had and the support they needed. And some of the feedback that we have got, what we got back when I was running the organization, was really positive. I mean, people that didn't even think they could go to university to graduate to become a nurse, or they could even thrive in the workplace or set up their own businesses, they were able to go and do that as a result of the help that we gave them. And that help is still within the workplace. You know, if anybody is in a workplace and needs support, I would really say speak to your line managers or speak to HR, because you thrive once you get the support that you need. And I think I'm very fortunate to work for a company that, always speak about neuro-inclusive in the workplace. And every support that I need, I've been given it. And now I go out and give talk to different companies about what one can, different employees can tap into, the help, support they need. And also the well-being is really important. It's all well and good that we get the diagnosis, we get the assessment and everything. But sometimes what I found was I was reliving the so Matt's back. Wonderful. I continue talking, Matt, whilst you were gone.
Honestly, the show must go on. I'm very grateful. So my computer only registered somehow on my phone, but we made it.
Wonderful.
So yes, thank you so much for holding the fort.
It's okay. Yeah.
Now, how do I get the questions up? I don't know, but let's keep going. So where did you get to?
So obviously when we had a little bit of a technical hitch, I was literally sharing a bit more of my journey and my story. And I was actually encouraging anybody here who's on a call, if they feel they might have ADHD or dyslexia or autism or just whatever their condition might be, I was actually saying that it might be a good idea to reach out to your line manager or speak to your HR department. So that's where we got to. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And I don't know, April, if you're able to change to the next question, if you can, that'd be amazing. If not, let's just go for it. So I know you mentioned about physical health, and I'm curious if you could talk a bit more about the connection between neurodivergence and physical health at all.
Okay, so there's so many different layers and so many different things going on. So having the neurodiverse conditions, yes, that's it. We have that. We know that what that is. You've got your diagnosis, Liz. You've got your papers. Everything's there. You can prove it wherever you have to go, and you need to exhibit that you've got that. But I was recently sort of going through some changes in my whole sort of body and life and everything, and I went to see my doctor, and he was actually saying that it could be menopause. So apart from my physical disability, menopause is somewhere in the mix of all that as well. Now, with part of my dyslexia is memory retention and processing information, and I'm ADHD and all that in the mix as well. So when I had the diagnosis of the menopause I'm going through at the moment, it was like, God, which is which and what's presenting itself today? Yeah. So we park that somewhere, so that's kind of in a mix there. So am I going through my mental blockage today or the brain fog because of oh, I forgot the word now. What is the word? It's gone out my head. You see, sometimes it just disappears. Menopause, that's it. Yeah. Is it because of menopause, or is it because I'm really struggling with dyslexia today? So I have to find a balance. Now, coming back to the question you asked me about physical disability. So I've got osteoarthritis, and it is a disability. In my case, it's quite severe that I had to go and have surgery. And as a result, that is now another story for another day. And those things all kind of can all pile up. And then it moves me on to talk about well-being and mental health, because you've got so much going on with your neurodiversity. Then you've been told menopause. Then now I've got dissociative arthritis. There's a lot going on. So there are days, Matt, I'll be really honest, I feel quite low. I'm at my lowest sometimes. And I'm quite lucky to have a really good manager that I can speak to and say, look, these are what I'm going through. And well-being is really important, and a mental health aspect of things. So I would also say, anyone on this call today, with all that I've explained, if you find that there are other challenges, do seek help and do go for help, because it is the same mind that's doing all of it. Just what I mean. And mental health is really important as well in this case. Yeah.
You did talk about not knowing if it's one thing or the other. That's a question I get quite often when it comes to neurodivergence. Is this my dyslexia? Is this my dyspraxia? Do you think, one, can you know what is what? And two, is it even important to be able to say, oh, that's the ADHD right there?
I think for me, because I know what dyslexia does to me, honestly. Like this morning, I was on call with my admin executive, and I was trying to do something, but I was finding it really frustrating. I don't know why I couldn't do it, and I've always done it, but just this morning I was unable to do that. And I think in a workplace, for me, if you have to keep going back to keep asking the same questions, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot how to do this, I forgot how to do that. I think at some point it becomes a bit like, oh, I know that my organization are very supportive, but if you work for an organization that have to understand what dyslexia is, it might be a bit of a challenge. So for me, dyslexia presents itself how dyslexia presents itself on paper. And then for the dyscalculia, obviously, the maths and adding things up. For the ADHD, sometimes I get brain fog and like hyper focus as well, really hyper focus. So I can identify each one of them, but sometimes I think they're all mad on up. They're all kind of put themselves together, and I'm like, I don't know where I am today. I can't do certain things because all these co-occurrence conditions have all come together, and I don't know which ones present itself today. That happens as well from time to time. Yeah, particularly when I'm driving with dyspraxia. When I'm driving, my left, my right, the signs I'm reading at the same time. I've got the navigator, the TomTom going at the same time. TomTom, sat-nav is what people call it. I've got all that going at the same time, and it can be really chaotic for me. And then I have to stop and say, right, okay, let's focus on one thing today, and let's just do one thing and not the other. Yeah.
And I suppose with the driving and the visual stimulation, it fits quite nicely into the Ireland syndrome. Now, I know not everyone will be as familiar with it, and essentially it's visual stress, but there's a bit more. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how that impacts you and why it's separate from dyslexia.
Okay, so Erling syndrome, also known as visual stress, it's like usually I wear my dark glasses, my dyslexia glasses, but it's in a drawer today because I knew that, Matt, you were going to read all the questions, so I didn't put it on. So with the Erling syndrome, so when I'm reading on white, the words move, and it's like the words have moved off the page, or it's like little ants running off the page. So I don't read very well on black and white. So my emails, I formulate my emails in the font blue. I have a blue overlay in front of my computer. Anything that's white, I get headaches, and I can't really work very well with fluorescent lights. So that's how the Erling exhibit itself, Erling syndrome, the visual stress. But because sometimes it can be quite too much, it gives me severe headaches and then migraines as well. So I have to wear the dyslexia glasses to kind of make everything look a bit more blue. So that's how the Erling and the visual stress exhibit itself. I mean, I think before, people thought, oh, I've got dyslexia and I can't read on paper. But when I had my diagnosis, all these were done so differently. That's made me understood. And I know there's not much awareness on Erling and visual stress, but that's how it exhibit itself for me. Yeah.
I suppose that adds additional challenges because you mentioned Erlen's and as well as like dyscalculia, which are not as well known. And I often find with myself at least, I will just if something is relating to my like dyscalculia or dysgraphia, I'll just say dyslexia just for simplicity. Is that something that you found, the way you have to, even though you know what is causing something, you'll kind of adapt it for the audience?
Well, yeah, if I have to write a report, for example, now that's another mountain to climb, then dyslexia will, come and say hello, and I'll say hello, and then we have to try and do this. But how I've really managed to do this, because I've got assistive technology, it really helps me. My Dragon helps me to do all my administrative tasks.
Yeah.
One of the great things of part of reasonable adjustment in the workplace for me has been, don't spend too long on a computer, in front of the computer. You work, you get up, you go and walk, take a little walk, 5-10 minutes, and come back to your computer and start all over again. So whenever each one is presenting itself, luckily for me, because I know how I deal with them, I'm able to kind of stop and start. But otherwise, it can be very chaotic at times. Yeah. For the many years I've worked with people with neurodiversity, some people don't know which one's exhibiting itself, and all the different ones, and it can be challenging. Yeah.
And I get another, to kind of branch off on that, is there, when you have multiple different conditions, it can seem sometimes that they can be kind of contradictory to each other. So, for example, I have autism and dyslexia. Autism means for me, I need a lot of detail because I love detail in order to understand something. But on contrast, my dyslexia means I like things in bullet points, short and simple. I was
Yes.
wondering if that's an experience that you have found, that you can have two things that sometimes don't seem like they would naturally go together.
Yeah. Do you know what, Matt? Exactly what you explained is me. I'm exactly the same. I'm a bit of a perfectionist because things have to be done in a very specific way. So in terms of my dyslexia, bullet point color coded for me. So the different color code system really works for me. However, I also like to work sometimes very chaotically. So I'm like, actually, let's mess it all up. And then, so hang on, but I thought you wanted it in bullet point. So it is contradictory. So I'm you're right what you're saying. I'm exactly the same in a way how I work sometimes. But for 100% for the dyslexia, it has to be so simplified. If you put so much words there for me, you've lost me. I don't even think I managed to read it. I'll just skip it because it just gives me a headache. I'll just go past it. So it has to be specifically written in the simplest way. So I normally say, please, not a big chunk of like words in an email. And I always say, look, ring me or do a Teams call and explain it to me. And then perhaps you can follow it up with an email. Because otherwise I will read and skip, and maybe skip the most important thing you want me to do. That hasn't been a deliberate. It's not because I don't want to read it. It's because I can't take the information. It's too much for me. Yeah.
With this kind of like the contradictory nature of multiple diagnoses, do you find that because you need more of a bespoke solution to ways of being supported, how do you communicate that? Because, for instance, if you say, oh, I have dyslexia, people with basic knowledge might know how to help you. But when you've got X, Y, Z, I imagine that you might have to tell people all the time. And is that something which is on you? Or do you think people should have a better awareness of how things work together?
I think individual people, we're all different in how we want information or how things should be done. So, for example, if I'm in a workplace and I'm doing my work for the dyslexia part of it, if somebody, for example, sent me an email and it was a whole lot of stuff, and I'm like, I'm not going to understand this, I would normally maybe reply back and say, could you please send me a Teams call? And I do this a lot with my line manager, actually. I would say to him, look, please, can we just have a quick team call? After I've had that call, a Teams call, I'm like, I know, I get what I have to do now. Then it can be followed up with an email, for example. So I'm very sensitive to noise. So I can't work where there's television in the background. If somebody's tapping on the table, I just can't do it. So I like to work in a very quiet environment. However, with the ADHD side of things, if I'm in a space where it's too quiet, it's like, well, actually, it's too quiet. Let's do some fidgeting. Let's do something. Let's move around. And it sounds like as if I'm distracting everybody else, but it is because ADHD is presenting itself at that moment. So it's a very complex condition. As you and I know, neurodiversity can be very complex, and there's still lots and lots of studies around that, isn't it? I have people say to me, but you've done that yesterday. You presented something really well yesterday. And it's like, well, I can't do it today. And it's like, well, why can't you? And because I just can't. And I haven't got a reason why I can't do it. I just can't do it. And I feel like sometimes it's like, I don't want it to sound as if I'm always using my neurodiverse condition as an excuse, because it isn't an excuse. It's just I just can't spell it today, and I can't give you what you want.
I resonate a lot with what you're saying. You know, my mates would joke and say, "Oh, Nat, you're using your D card again, like the disability." I was like, "No, it's not." Or like some days they will chuck a ball at me, and and I'm like, "I'll catch it," and I was like, "You don't have dyspraxia." Like, doesn't really work like that. I think people think that it's like a consistent, but how it affects you can spike and go up and down. So that's why, like, some days you'll be overstimulated, other days you'll have a lot more kind of cognitive leeway. But maybe it's people's limited understanding which kind of cause that. But I suppose I'd also say it's our own limited understanding. You know, it was only until recently when I did my master's in neuroscience where I suddenly didn't just know what my challenges were, but I knew why I was having challenges. Is that I think that you personally have found important? No, not knowing just what's difficult, but why it's difficult, or maybe you haven't needed that experience.
Oh, I go through it every day, Matt. Every day, every day something presents itself every day. Depends what the situation might be, you know. And if that's the case, then sometimes I take deep breaths and I thought, okay, not today, or can I please just come back to you on that? Because I need time to go away, process it, find out what you want me to do, understand what you want me to do, then come back to you. Yeah, because otherwise I don't want it, Matt, because I've always been, it's not Matt, it's Nat, isn't it? I keep calling you Matt, it's Nat.
Yeah, do you know what? Tomato, tomato. What's the letter between friends?
It's Nat, and I can say Matt, right? Okay. Because when I was growing up, the word was like, "Oh, she's a failure. She's never going to amount to anything." She keeps getting it wrong. She keeps making mistakes. Because of those things, sometimes they come back to bite you or bite me. I always want to make sure whatever I do it to fine detail. So I'm sort of word OCD. I'll constantly have to check to make sure that email makes sense. And then half of the time, there's loads of mistakes in there anyway. But hey, it is what it is, isn't it? I can't do much. I can only do what I can do. Yeah. But there are some great strengths as dyslexic people. We've got some amazing strengths. So I use my strength where I have to use it. Yeah.
April, do you have another question lined up? Now, just so everyone knows, because my computer blew up, I can't actually see your comments. So if you are asking questions, apologize. But again, we're doing what we can. So I'm hoping it works. But I think maybe that's something we should transition onto on more of the strength side. Is that have you found that, like, for instance, if you say dyslexia, people can like reel off generic strengths, but when you're kind of like layering things up, are there strengths which you have that have appeared to you which maybe isn't kind of like the stereotypical strength of having, say, ADHD or dyslexia?
I mean, one of my strengths, I can say, is that, like problem solving strengths like problem solving, seeing the bigger picture. Like I said, I don't have a fear. I don't have fear speaking in public. There are some people that would just freeze. They say, "Oh, I can't do public speaking," but I don't have a problem with that. You see, it comes naturally for me. So I look at that as a strength rather than, I may not be able to write you a dissertation of 50,000 words, but I can talk you 50,000 words if you want me to, And I think, that's really important, people skills, dealing with people and empathy and being there when that person needs that support and understanding. All those things are great strengths. As a dyslexic, ADHD, someone with multiple layers of neurodiversity conditions, I think those things are really important. It's not all about, we're not all going to graduate and be doctors and lawyers and solicitors. Some of us will be creative public speakers, podcast presenters, whoever we're meant to be. And we just sometimes have to use what comes naturally to us rather than trying to fit into what society wants us to be. Yeah.
I think that's really nice. And that leads us very nicely on to the last question that I will ask you today. What advice would you give to people? Or what would you like people to know who have kind of co-occurrence, who might be struggling or looking for support? Because I imagine that's what a lot of people are attending here today is, maybe they might feel a little bit lost. Any last words?
The last thing I want to say is, I always say it's good to talk. When I say it's good to talk, even if it's to a colleague, or even if it's to a friend, somebody, because sometimes some of these conditions, because it's got a stigma attached to it, and I know definitely in my community, there's a lot of stigma attached to all that we've spoken about today, including a physical disability, for example.
Mm.
So I would say it's always good to talk, and you talk to the people that you feel that you can trust, i.e. you can go to your HR department, speak to somebody there. Your line manager might be able to, support you in the right way that you need to be supported. Because once you speak to someone, you find that someone will say, well, actually, I know someone who's got dyslexia, or my sister's got dyslexia, or, and then that kind of starts off a conversation. Rather than keeping it to yourself. Because when I was in denial and I kept everything to myself, my mental health was in a really bad place. Because I kept hiding. I didn't want to be found out. I didn't want no one else to know. I felt like shameful, a big grown-up person, and I can't spell things. I can't read things properly. It was a bit of a shameful thing for me. But once I found that I was talking about it, I found that other people were also sharing their experience. And it just made it so much easier to be able to live a fulfilled life than rather than holding on to everything that I was going through. Now, one might say, well, actually, how do I even start that conversation? I would normally say that if you work for a company that, talk about disability confidence and things like that, then that door should be opened for you to be able to go and have that conversation with your line manager. And there are other agencies out there that also give support. There's some, you've got the British Dyslexia Association that will give you this, like the call, the helpline, or so forth. And these days you only have to look on TikTok, LinkedIn. There's so many people advocating for these conditions, so you can always kind of look at the positive ones and go for the help that you need.
So it really seems that the continuous theme throughout most of our chat has been around communication.
Yes.
Letting people understand you and you understand yourself.
Yes.
So I think that's a very positive message. And I know obviously we're running out of time, but you briefly mentioned mental health. I think that's another area which is very often comorbid, and not necessarily for, it doesn't have the same positive connotations as neurodivergence, because it's normally a negative side effect of living differently in a world which isn't really adapted towards you. Like the question that I just see on here is kind of understanding around that kind of self-doubt and whether or not a late diagnosis is something that you should consider. Like, did you, for yourself, because you said you got diagnosed later on, what kind of initiated you to even think about dyslexia as a possibility?
When my lecturer actually said to me, "Oh, I think you might have dyslexia," I didn't believe it. So I didn't think it was a possibility. But it's until I had the assessment and thought, oh, okay, so I do have dyslexia. And yes, that's why you've been struggling. And just to say, Matt, prior to the assessment, I was in a very dark place. I would start a job, go into a job, because I don't know I've got dyslexia. I would start a job as an admin officer many years ago. And it's like, Liz, you're really struggling here. And then when I get found out, I would leave. Well, that's no good, is it? At that time, I'm talking about 20, 25 years ago. So once I got the assessment and I thought, okay, these are my strengths, because I'm struggling to do the reading, the writing, the spelling, the memory retention, all that things that go with it. Well, why don't I go for a job that I can use my strengths to do what I can do? So I ended up in a job that's more people focused, so supporting people in whichever way help that they needed. For an example, 25 years ago, I worked for Yorkshire TV as a receptionist. Now, as you can see, Matt, I'm a bit of a talkative person. And as a receptionist, my skills and everything I had shone through. And up till now, I used to keep in touch with some of my managers almost 20 years ago. And because I did the job effort, there was no effort put into it. Naturally, I could do that. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that, if you find your strengths, you can run towards that. In terms of self-doubt, I'll be honest, Matt, I still go through some of that these days. Sometimes like, can I really do that? It never really goes away, but it's how you manage it and how you say to yourself with your mindset, I can do this with the help and the support and the right technology that is there for me to do that. For example, if I've got to spell a really difficult word, I just have to speak to my phone. We didn't have that 20, 30 years ago. I'd have to try and spell necessary or whatever that word might be.
Yeah, no idea.
Yeah. So there are things that one can do. Yeah.
That's a really powerful message, because I think so often we hear these kind of rags to riches stories of how someone started in a dark place and overcome it. But I think the truth is we don't really ever overcome it, but we learn to work with it and to see the different perspectives. So I think that's a really nice message to end on. And I would just like to say a massive, massive thank you for being the first person to be our first guest. And despite the technical difficulties, I've really, really enjoyed it. And I hope the audience has as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. But just before I go, I just wanted to say that you don't need an official diagnosis, for example, to be able to get the support that you need in a workplace. I just really wanted to hammer on that, because you don't have to go out and spend so much money on a diagnosis for your workplace to be able to give you the reasonable workplace adjustment, because access to work is something that one can apply for. But if you think and you feel that actually I might have ADHD, then you speak to your line manager in your HR department and they'll take it from there. I just thought it's really important that I said that last.
Again, while we said it is a luxury to get a diagnosis, not everyone is in that position. So I think that's a really good final advice. All right, well, let's end it there for today, because that's a lot to process and think about. But just so everyone knows, we do these webinars every single week, and once a fortnight we're going to be having different guests in. So I really encourage you to get involved. I believe from memory, in 2 weeks' time, our next guest is Dr. Nyla. Sorry, their surname I can't quite pronounce, but they are amazing. They are doing pioneering research around autistic online communities, and it's actually what I based my master dissertation on. So that is a really fascinating work. But everyone, do stay engaged with us. Reach out to Elizabeth if you want to. Like I said, they work for Neurobox. They're a really great partner of ours, and hopefully see you soon. So yeah. Bye everyone, and just Sorry.
Do you want me to stay here, Matt? I can stay here for a bit, once everybody.
So what we need to do is, when this ends, it will encode and it upload it. So if you can just stay put. But April, if you can shut down the talk now, and everyone, we're good. And I promise you, I'll make sure my computer doesn't blow up next time. But you know what? Not a bad delay, to be fair. Pretty seamless, if I do say so myself.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.